Jack Harrison was checking his fence line at dawn, his 3 German shepherds fanning out ahead as they did every morning on their Texas Hill Country ranch. The gunshot from the neighboring property pierced the quiet morning air, followed by his dog's frantic barking and the sight of blood trailing into the woods that made his heart race. 6 months later, Jack's daughter Emily, once nearly mute from autism, spoke in full sentences to a creature that shouldn't exist in their home, a half-grown bobcat that sat obediently beside her bed, its wild yellow eyes fixed on her with a devotion that defied the laws of nature itself. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The Harrison family ranch sat on 70 rugged acres in Texas Hill Country, where limestone outcroppings punctuated the drought-hardened landscape like ancient bones breaking through skin. The cedar and oak trees, twisted by years of harsh winds, provided little shade for the scattered Hereford cattle that grazed on whatever sparse vegetation survived the unforgiving summer. It was beautiful country, but it demanded respect, the kind of land that could sustain life or take it, depending on how well you understood its rules. Jack Harrison knew those rules better than most. At 45, the lines around his eyes told stories of squinting into too many sunsets, searching horizons for signs of predators that might threaten his livestock. Once one of the region's most sought-after hunting guides, Jack had hung up his rifle 5 years ago after witnessing a wealthy client's gleeful slaughter of a mountain lion and her cubs. Now he made his living through wildlife photography and carefully managed cattle breeding, a conversion that many neighbors viewed as betrayal of their way of life. Sarah Harrison had supported her husband's transformation, though it had meant tightening their belts considerably. At 42, she ran the only veterinary clinic within 30 miles, splitting her time between treating pampered pets in town and making house calls to ranches when livestock needed care. Practical to her core, with prematurely silver hair always pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, Sarah balanced Jack's occasional idealism with clear-eyed reality. Her hands, always slightly rough from work, moved with precision whether suturing a wound or tucking hair behind their daughter's ear. Emily, their 12-year-old daughter, existed in a world partially of her own making. Diagnosed with autism at age 3, she observed life through a different lens, one that sometimes limited her verbal expression but enhanced her perception in ways her parents were still discovering. Her dark blonde hair hung in 2 braids most days, and her blue eyes, so like her father's, often focused on details others missed entirely. Though she attended school with an aide, she struggled with the social demands of 6th grade and found more comfort in the company of animals than peers. The backbone of the Harrison Ranch security consisted of 3 German shepherds, Major, Duke, and Scout. Major, the oldest at 7 years, carried himself with the quiet authority of a career military officer. His dark face had begun to show silver, but his amber eyes missed nothing. Duke, 5 years old and powerfully built, served as enforcer, while 3-year-old Scout brought youthful energy and unmatched tracking abilities to the pack. Jack had trained them himself, and they patrolled the property with disciplined precision, keeping coyotes and other predators away from the cattle. The neighboring Miller Ranch sprawled across 500 acres to the east, dwarfing the Harrison property. Frank Miller, a 3rd-generation cattle rancher in his mid-50s, viewed predators as nothing more than vermin to be eliminated. His weathered face, permanently reddened from sun and whiskey, rarely softened into anything resembling a smile. He'd lost 2 calves to mountain lions last season and blamed Jack's soft-hearted foolishness for encouraging predators in the area. To the west lay state land managed by Texas Parks and Wildlife, where Ranger Thomas Dawson oversaw hunting regulations and wildlife management across 20,000 acres. At 40, Dawson projected the crisp authority of his khaki uniform and badge, his voice carrying the flat certainty of a man unaccustomed to being questioned. His relationship with local ranchers balanced precariously between enforcement and accommodation, though he seemed to find more reasons to visit the Miller property than the Harrison Ranch. The small town of Oak Ridge, population 2,300, lay 15 miles south, where most locals viewed wildlife through the scope of a rifle rather than binoculars. The annual predator hunt fundraiser for the volunteer fire department remained the social event of the year, with prizes for the largest coyote, bobcat, and mountain lion. It was a community bound by generations of shared hardship, where change came slowly, if at all. Dr. Patricia Wells made the drive from San Antonio twice monthly to monitor Emily's progress, her city clothes and gentle approach marking her as an outsider. At 62, the child psychologist had seen enough progress in different forms to recognize that improvement rarely followed textbook examples, especially with children on the spectrum. Her patient gray eyes watched Emily carefully during their sessions, noting every new word, every subtle shift in behavior. This was the world into which a wild creature would arrive, unwanted and unexpected, a catalyst that would fracture the carefully maintained balance between man and nature, between neighbors, between progress and tradition. The land itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable collision of worlds that even the wisest among them could not predict. The morning that changed everything dawned crisp and clear in early October. Frost silvered the pastures, and Jack's breath fogged as he and his 3 German shepherds made their regular perimeter check. The dogs moved with practiced efficiency, Major leading, Duke flanking right, Scout ranging ahead to investigate any unusual scents. Jack followed with a thermos of coffee, his camera slung across his back more from habit than intention. The gunshot shattered the dawn stillness, echoing across the limestone hills. It came from the direction of Miller's property. Not unusual during hunting season, but the frantic reaction of his dogs was Major's ears pinned back, a low growl rumbling from his chest. Scout barked sharply, nose working the air, before Jack could command them to stay. All 3 dogs bolted toward the fence line separating the properties. Major Duke Scout heel, Jack called, but the dogs were locked onto something he couldn't perceive. He jogged after them, his boots crunching through frost-covered grass. When he reached the fence, the dogs were pacing anxiously, whining and looking back at him with unusual urgency. Scout pawed at the ground where dark droplets stained the frost blood, fresh and bright against the white. A trail of blood led under the fence and into the scrubby woods beyond. Jack hesitated. Crossing onto Miller's land uninvited wasn't something he did lightly, but the amount of blood concerned him. If Miller had wounded something and not tracked it, the animal could suffer for days. "Stay," he commanded the dogs, then thought better of it. "Major, come. You 2 stay." The lead dog slipped under the fence with him, while Duke and Scout sat reluctantly at attention. 20 yards into the trees, Jack found her a female bobcat, her tawny fur matted with blood from a gunshot wound to her hindquarters. She was still alive, panting shallowly, her golden eyes glazed with pain, but still tracking his movement. Major stood stock still beside Jack, making no move toward the wounded predator. "Easy now," Jack murmured, though whether to the dog or the dying cat he wasn't sure. The bobcat's front paw twitched toward a hollow beneath a nearby cedar, and that's when Jack noticed the soft mewling sound. Keeping his distance from the wounded mother, he crouched to peer into the darkness of the hollow. 2 tiny eyes reflected the morning light, a bobcat kitten, no more than a few weeks old, huddled in the back of the makeshift den. As Jack watched, the mother bobcat made a final, rattling breath and went still. The kitten mewed pitifully, emerging just enough for Jack to see its spotted fur and oversized paws. "Damn it, Frank," Jack muttered. He surveyed the area more carefully now and spotted what he feared the metallic glint of an illegal trap partially hidden among the leaves. Texas had strict regulations about trapping methods and seasons, and this setup violated several laws. Jack made a decision that would later seem both inevitable and impossible. He removed his flannel overshirt, reached carefully into the hollow, and wrapped the hissing kitten in the warm fabric. It was tiny, probably born late in the season, and its feeble struggles against his gentle grip told him it was already weakening from hunger. Major watched the entire process with unusual intensity, sniffing the bundle when Jack brought it to him. "What do you think? Old boy Sarah's going to have my hide for this." The walk home felt longer with his precious cargo. Duke and Scout greeted their return with curious whines, circling and sniffing at the bundle in Jack's arms. Remarkably, none of the dogs showed aggression toward the small predator. Perhaps they sensed its vulnerability, or perhaps Major's calm acceptance set the tone. Sarah was in the kitchen when Jack entered through the mudroom, the 3 dogs clustering around him. "Got a situation," he said simply, unwrapping the bundle enough for her to see. Her expression shifted from surprise to concern to the professional assessment he recognized from countless emergency cases at her clinic. "Jack Harrison, tell me you did not bring a wild bobcat into this house. Its mother's dead on Miller's property. Illegal trap. Probably shot her when she was already caught." The disgust in his voice was evident. "Couldn't leave it," Sarah sighed, already reaching for the bundle. "Let me see." Her examination was gentle but thorough. "Male, maybe 3 weeks old, dehydrated, but no obvious injuries." She looked up at Jack. "You know we can't keep it. I'll call Wildlife Rescue after I get some fluids in him." Emily appeared in the doorway then, drawn by the unusual activity. She stood silently, watching with intense focus as Sarah prepared a warm electrolyte solution in a small bottle. "Come see, Em," Jack said softly, "but stay quiet. He's scared." Emily approached with the careful movements that characterized her interaction with new animals. She peered at the small, spotted kitten now wrapped in a proper towel on their kitchen counter. For a long moment, she simply observed. Then, to her parents' astonishment, she whispered, "He needs a name." It was the first unprompted sentence she had spoken in months. Sarah and Jack exchanged a startled glance over their daughter's head. The kitten mewled weakly, and Emily's hand moved toward it with instinctive gentleness. "Careful," Sarah cautioned. "Wild animals bite. Honey." But the kitten nuzzled against Emily's fingers, perhaps responding to her stillness or seeking comfort in its terrified state. "Wilder," Emily said with unexpected clarity. "His name is Wilder." That afternoon, Sarah made the necessary calls to wildlife rehabilitation centers, only to learn that the nearest facility equipped for bobcat rehabilitation was overcrowded and couldn't take another orphaned predator until the following week. Her veterinary training warred with her common sense keeping a wild predator, even a baby one, was both illegal and potentially dangerous. But Emily had sat beside the makeshift nest they'd created in a dog crate for 3 straight hours, speaking soft words to Wilder that neither parent could quite hear. Jack's discovery of the illegal trap needed reporting, but he hesitated. Ranger Dawson had always seemed a little too friendly with Miller, a little too willing to look the other way when it came to certain hunting violations. Instead, he documented everything with his camera the trap, the dead bobcat, the blood trail, evidence, if it became necessary. As night fell, the 3 German shepherds took up positions around the crate containing the bobcat kitten. Major lay closest, his large body providing warmth through the bars. Sarah watched this unexpected behavior with professional curiosity, while Jack wondered what instinct made these predators protect rather than hunt the small wild cat. No one anticipated that the fragile kitten would survive the night. No one could have predicted that his presence would eventually shake their community to its very foundations. 2 weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights and surprising developments. Against all odds, Wilder thrived under the Harrisons' care. The bobcat kitten graduated from bottle feeding to a mixture of specialized formula and soft meat that Sarah prepared with the same precision she used for surgical procedures. His weight doubled, his fur grew sleeker, and his eyes, now fully open, tracked everything with the intense focus of a natural predator. Most remarkable was Emily's transformation. The girl who had spoken perhaps 50 words total in the previous month now narrated her actions to Wilder in full, clear sentences. "I'm getting your breakfast now," she would tell him as she carefully measured formula. "You need to grow strong." Her special education teacher sent home a note asking what had prompted such a dramatic improvement in her verbal skills, but it was the behavior of the German shepherds that truly defied explanation. Rather than viewing the Bobcat as either prey or intruder, the three dogs had integrated him into their pack structure as something to be protected and, surprisingly, instructed. Major, with his characteristic dignity, would correct Wilder's more feral behaviors with gentle nudges or low, rumbling sounds that weren't quite growls. When the kitten hissed at Sarah during a medical check, Major gave a single sharp bark that immediately settled the Bobcat. Jack witnessed Duke demonstrating a sit position to the kitten, lowering his hindquarters deliberately while maintaining eye contact with Wilder. By the end of the second week, the Bobcat kitten would sit on command, not with the reliability of a trained dog, but with enough consistency to startle visitors. "He thinks he's a dog," Sarah remarked, both amused and concerned as she documented the behavior in a journal. Her professional interest had overcome her initial reluctance. "I've never seen interspecies imprinting quite like this." On the morning of the 15th day, Jack was teaching Emily how to entice Wilder to chase appropriate toys rather than household items when a truck crunched up their gravel driveway. Through the window, he recognized Frank Miller's mud-spattered Ford. "Take Wilder to your room," he told Emily quietly. "Keep the door closed." Frank's weathered face was set in grim lines as he stepped onto the porch. "Harrison," he greeted curtly. "Missing something from my property?" Jack crossed his arms. "Not sure what you mean." "Frank. Bobcat I shot. Female. Big one. Had her in my sights clean. But she dragged herself off before I could collect. Trail went cold near your fence line." Frank's eyes narrowed. "Figured you might have seen something, being as you're always watching the wildlife." The lie about a clean shot fired Jack's temper, but he kept his voice even. "Haven't seen any wounded bobcats. Did find an illegal trap on your side of the property line, though type that's been banned for about 15 years now." A flush crept up Frank's neck. "Man's got a right to protect his livestock however he sees fit." "Not according to state law," Jack countered, "and not when the traps catch nursing mothers." Something shifted in Frank's expression. Surprise, quickly masked. "Don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do. I think you shot a female bobcat that was already caught in your illegal trap, and I think you know she had a kitten." Jack stepped closer. "That kitten would have starved to death if someone hadn't found it." Frank's hand moved toward his belt where a hunting knife was sheathed. "You interfering with my trap line, Harrison, because that would be trespassing. Just documenting violations for Ranger Dawson." Jack bluffed. "I'm sure he'd be interested in those antique traps you're using." The rancher spat to one side. "Dawson understands how things work out here. Even if you've gone soft, predators take my calves, I take predators. Simple as that." "Not when you're breaking the law," Jack said. "And not when you leave animals to suffer." Frank's face hardened. "You always were too soft for your own good. That wildlife rescue place called me. You know, asked if I'd seen any orphaned bobcat kittens in the area where I reported my kill. Seems someone's been making calls about rehabilitation." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Told them I hadn't seen any kittens, but I could call them back if you'd like." The threat hung in the air between them. Frank knew or strongly suspected that the Harrisons had the Bobcat kitten, and he was making it clear he could report them at any time. "We're done here," Jack said evenly. "I'd appreciate it if you'd keep to your side of the fence line from now on." After Frank's truck disappeared down the road, Sarah emerged from Emily's room looking troubled. "He knows about Wilder, doesn't he?" "He suspects," Jack confirmed. "And he's using it as leverage because he knows I have evidence of his illegal trapping." "We need to call the Wildlife Center," Sarah said firmly. "Today. We've always known this was temporary." Jack nodded, but his heart sank at the thought of telling Emily. Her progress had been so remarkable. What would happen when Wilder was gone? The call to the Central Texas Wildlife Rehabilitation Center went differently than expected. The director explained that they were still over capacity and short-staffed due to budget cuts. They could take the Bobcat kitten, but not for at least another week. "Keep doing what you're doing," the wildlife expert advised. "Sounds like you're handling it well. Just don't get too attached. These cats need to retain their wild instincts for successful release." That afternoon, as if the universe had decided to complicate matters further, a green Texas Parks and Wildlife truck rolled up their driveway. Ranger Thomas Dawson stepped out, adjusting his campaign hat against the sun. "Afternoon, Harrisons," he called as Jack came out to meet him. "Got a report I need to follow up on." Jack kept his face neutral. "Something I can help with. Anonymous tip about y'all keeping wildlife without proper permits." Dawson's eyes scanned the property. Specifically mentioned a bobcat. Before Jack could respond, the screen door creaked and Emily stepped onto the porch. "Dad Wilder did the sit command for Major again." All by himself. Dawson's eyebrows rose as he took in this information. "Wilder would be the Bobcat, I take it." Jack sighed. "Found him orphaned 2 weeks ago. Mother was killed in a trap on Miller's property. We've been in contact with the rehabilitation center, but they're at capacity." "Going to need to see this animal," Dawson said, his hand resting casually near his sidearm. Inside, Sarah was already preparing documentation, her veterinary records of Wilder's care, emails from the Wildlife Center confirming they would take him when space permitted, and Jack's photographs of the illegal trap and the dead mother bobcat. Dawson reviewed these materials with an unreadable expression before turning his attention to the bobcat kitten, now watching cautiously from behind Major's protective bulk. The German shepherd allowed the ranger to approach, but his posture made it clear he was monitoring every movement. "Well, I'll be damned," Dawson muttered as Wilder responded to Emily's quiet sit command, mimicking Major's posture. "Never seen anything like that." Emily, normally withdrawn around strangers, looked Dawson in the eye. "He needs to stay until he's stronger. He was very sick." Something in her direct gaze seemed to unsettle the ranger. He shuffled the papers in his hand. "Technically, you folks are in violation of state wildlife regulations. Can't just keep predator species as pets, even temporarily." "We're not keeping him as a pet," Sarah countered. "We're providing emergency care until the rehabilitation center can take him. As a licensed veterinarian, I'm qualified to provide that care." As Dawson prepared to respond, Jack noticed something that made his blood run cold. The toe of the ranger's right boot had a distinctive gouge across the leather, identical to a boot print he had photographed near the illegal trap. "Where'd you get that information about us having a bobcat, Ranger?" Jack asked casually. "Since we only just found him 2 weeks ago, and the only person we've told is the Wildlife Center." Dawson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Like I said, anonymous tip." "Interesting timing, since Frank Miller was just here asking about a bobcat he lost track of." Jack maintained eye contact. "You two talk often." A flash of something anger-worry crossed Dawson's face before his official mask returned. "I talk to all the local landowners. Harrison, part of the job." He straightened his papers. I'll be filing a report on this situation. You have 1 week to get that animal to a licensed facility, or I'll have to confiscate it. That's being generous, given the circumstances." As Dawson left, Jack watched him through the window, noting how the ranger paused at his truck to make a call, glancing back toward the house with a frown. "He was there," Jack told Sarah quietly, "when that trap was set, or when the mother was shot. He knows more than he's saying." "What do we do now?" Sarah asked. From her spot on the floor beside Wilder and the dogs, Emily answered with unexpected clarity. "We protect him, like Major protects us." Over the following weeks, as autumn deepened toward winter, life at the Harrison Ranch developed a new rhythm centered around Wilder's growing presence. The Bobcat kitten rapidly matured into adolescence, his spotted coat developing the distinctive tawny coloration of an adult, his movements gaining the fluid grace that made bobcats such effective hunters. Yet alongside these natural developments emerged behavior so unusual that Sarah filled 3 notebooks with observations. Wilder didn't just tolerate the German shepherds, he studied them. When Major stood alert at a distant sound, Wilder would adopt the same posture, ears forward, body tense. When Duke raced the perimeter fence during their morning patrol, Wilder followed, mirroring the dog's path with uncanny precision. And when Scout tracked a rabbit's scent through the yard, Wilder watched the process with such focused intensity that Jack swore the Bobcat was taking mental notes. Most remarkable was his relationship with Emily. The girl who had once gone days without speaking now narrated her daily activities to Wilder in complex sentences, explaining the science homework she struggled with or describing the clouds as she pointed skyward. The Bobcat would sit beside her, those golden eyes fixed on her face with an attentiveness that sometimes brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "It's like he knows she needs him to listen," she confided to Jack one evening as they watched Emily reading aloud from her science textbook. Wilder curled beside her on the porch swing. "Dr. Wells wants to document the relationship for a journal article," Jack replied. "Says she's never seen this kind of breakthrough with an animal that isn't specifically trained for therapy." Sarah frowned slightly. "More attention is the last thing we need right now. Dawson's already watching us too closely." The wildlife officer had made 3 routine checks in the past month, each time with thinly veiled warnings about the consequences of keeping a wild predator. Jack had caught him photographing their property from the road twice. Meanwhile, the rehabilitation center kept delaying Wilder's transfer, citing space limitations and staffing shortages. Jack's suspicions about Dawson's connection to Miller's illegal trapping grew stronger. He'd begun recording their conversations and documenting the ranger's visits with times and dates. During his last inspection, Dawson had mentioned specific details about the trap site that Jack had never disclosed to him, information only someone who had been present would know. "I think he's worried we'll file a formal complaint about the trapping," Jack told Sarah. "He's building a case against us to discredit anything we might say." The situation grew more complicated when Emily's school principal called for a conference. Mrs. Abernathy, a stern woman with 3 decades of educational experience, sat them down with Emily's teacher and the school counselor. "Emily's recent improvements are remarkable," the principal began, "but we've become concerned about some of her stories." The teacher, Ms. Reeves, smiled gently. "Emily has been participating in class discussions for the first time, which is wonderful. But she frequently references her experiences with a pet bobcat. The other children are quite intrigued. We've explained it's a temporary rehabilitation situation," Sarah said carefully. The counselor leaned forward. "Emily describes this animal as part of your family. She told the class it sleeps with your dogs and comes when called. Several parents have expressed concerns about Emily being exposed to a wild predator." Jack met their gazes steadily. "We're working with wildlife authorities. The bobcat is being well cared for until it can be properly released or transferred to a permanent facility." Principal Abernathy's mouth tightened. "Mr. Harrison, this isn't just about the legality. We're concerned about Emily's emotional attachment to an animal that will inevitably be removed from your home. Her progress is tied to this relationship. What happens when it ends? It was a question that haunted them during the drive home. Emily quiet in the back seat. That weekend brought the first true test of Wilder's unusual upbringing. The Harrisons took a family picnic to the far edge of their property, a limestone outcropping overlooking a shallow creek. For the first time, they allowed Wilder limited freedom outdoors, though he remained tethered to a long training lead attached to Jack's belt. What they witnessed astonished them. Wilder stayed close to the three dogs, following their cues about acceptable boundaries. When Scout froze at the sound of approaching hikers on the public trail below, Wilder immediately dropped into a crouch behind a rocky outcropping, demonstrating both learned behavior and natural instinct. He came immediately when Emily called his name, a response almost unheard of in wild felines. As they packed up to leave, voices carried up from the trail. A family was pointing toward them, the father raising what Jack recognized as a telephoto camera lens. "That's a bobcat," the man called out. "With those dogs?" Jack quickly gathered their belongings. "Time to go," he told Sarah and Emily, trying to keep his voice casual. But it was too late. Photos of Wilder with the Harrison family appeared on the local community Facebook page that evening. By morning, the images had been shared hundreds of times with comments ranging from fascination to outrage. "Dangerous predator kept as pet by local family," read one inflammatory headline in the community newsletter. "Child endangered by parents' reckless behavior," claimed another post, which tagged the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. The controversy spread rapidly through their small community. Longtime customers canceled appointments at Sarah's veterinary clinic. Parents requested that their children be seated away from Emily at school. Jack received cancellations for 3 photography workshops he had scheduled for the winter. "This is getting out of hand," Sarah said as she read through the latest social media comments. "We need to contact the Wildlife Center again. Maybe they can take him now." Emily, overhearing, came into the kitchen with tears streaming down her face. "No," she said with unexpected force. "Wilder belongs with us. With me." "Honey," Sarah began gently, "we always knew this was temporary. Wilder is a wild animal. He needs to be with his own kind eventually." "He doesn't know how to be a bobcat," Emily argued, displaying the kind of reasoning she'd rarely expressed before Wilder arrived. "Major and Duke and Scout are teaching him, but he's not ready yet." Jack knelt to her level. "What do you mean? They're teaching him—" Emily's explanation, delivered with unusual clarity, revealed an educational system the adults had only partially observed. Major had been showing Wilder territorial boundaries, teaching him to patrol and mark appropriate areas. Duke demonstrated hunting techniques, modified from the dog's training to retrieve. Scout was teaching tracking and scent recognition. The 3 shepherds were essentially providing a surrogate bobcat education, adapted through canine methods. "He needs more time," Emily insisted. "Please." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Jack opened it to find Frank Miller standing on their porch, his expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "Need a word." "Harrison," he said gruffly. Jack stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "What can I do for you?" "Frank," Miller removed his hat, turning it in weathered hands. "Came to give you a heads up. Dawson's filing for an emergency removal order for that bobcat of yours. Heard him talking about it at the feed store this morning." Jack studied his neighbor with suspicion. "Why would you warn me? You made it pretty clear where you stand on predators." Miller glanced toward the hills. "Been thinking about what you said. About that mama cat in the trap." He cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Didn't know she had a kitten. Wouldn't have left it to starve. Whatever you might think of me." So why tell me about Dawson's plans? Something ain't right with that ranger. Miller admitted. Used to think he was just being practical, looking the other way when necessary. But lately, he trailed off, then met Jack's eyes directly. He's been bringing in hunters from out of state, wealthy fellas who want guaranteed trophies. They pay cash for access to prime hunting spots, whether it's season or not. Been using my land as part of their route. Jack processed this information carefully. You're saying Dawson is taking bribes to allow illegal hunting? Don't have proof, Miller said. But I've seen enough to know something's off. And the way he's fixated on your Bobcat situation, it ain't normal enforcement. After Miller left, Jack shared the conversation with Sarah, who remained skeptical. Miller's been feuding with us for years. Why the sudden concern? I don't trust him either, Jack acknowledged. But what if he's right about Dawson? We need to be prepared. They spent the evening researching their options, contacting wildlife advocacy organizations and reviewing state regulations. Sarah reached out to colleagues at university veterinary programs who might document Wilder's unusual development. Jack backed up all his evidence regarding the illegal trap and Dawson's suspicious behavior. Emily, meanwhile, sat in the backyard with Wilder and the 3 dogs as twilight settled over the hills. Jack watched through the window as she demonstrated to the Bobcat how to shake hands, a trick the dogs had mastered years ago. To his amazement, Wilder extended his paw after several attempts, earning praise from both Emily and Major, who gave an approving bark. The following morning, Dr. Patricia Wells arrived for her scheduled session with Emily. The psychologist had been documenting Emily's progress with professional interest. But today, she brought another agenda. I've been consulting with colleagues about Emily's relationship with Wilder, she explained after Emily had gone outside with the dogs. There's growing research on animal-assisted therapy for children on the spectrum, but this case is unique. I'd like permission to document it more formally. Sarah hesitated. We're in a precarious legal situation, Patricia. Drawing more attention could make things worse. Or it could help. Dr. De Wells countered. Documented therapeutic benefit would strengthen your case for a special permit. I've already spoken with a colleague at Texas A&M's veterinary school who's intrigued by the interspecies dynamics you've described. Their discussion was interrupted by Emily bursting through the door, face flushed with excitement. Wilder did it. He retrieves just like Duke now. Dr. Wells followed them outside to witness the Bobcat returning a thrown ball to Emily's feet, not with a dog's enthusiastic joy, but with calculated precision, studying Emily's reaction as if cataloging the social exchange. Extraordinary, the psychologist murmured, recording the interaction on her phone. The cognitive processing happening here. Later that week, as the controversy in the community intensified, Wilder became the subject of local news coverage. A reporter from the county newspaper interviewed Jack about the miracle Bobcat that behaved like a dog and had helped a child with autism find her voice. The publicity brought unexpected allies. University researchers requested access to observe and document Wilder's unusual behaviors. A wildlife photographer from National Geographic contacted Jack about a possible feature. The director of a wildlife sanctuary in East Texas offered expertise and potential legal support. It also brought greater scrutiny. The Texas Parks and Wildlife Department received formal complaints about the Harrisons' illegal pet. Child Protective Services called to schedule a home evaluation based on anonymous concerns about Emily's safety. Ranger Dawson increased his drive-bys to daily occurrences, often parking at the end of their driveway to observe through binoculars. Jack began carrying his camera everywhere, documenting each interaction. He installed security cameras around the property ostensibly to monitor Wilder's outdoor activities, but primarily to record any suspicious behavior from Dawson or others. The situation reached a breaking point when Jack returned from town to find Dawson's truck parked in their driveway and the ranger himself standing on their porch, arguing with Sarah. "This is a legal inspection," Dawson was saying as Jack approached. "I don't need additional warrants." "You need my consent to enter without one," Sarah countered, blocking the doorway. "And I don't consent." Jack joined them, noting that Dawson was in full uniform, hand resting near his sidearm. "Is there a problem, Ranger?" "Departments received multiple complaints," Dawson said flatly. "I'm here to evaluate the situation with the Bobcat and determine if emergency removal is warranted." "Based on what new information?" Jack asked. "You were here last week and saw that Wilder is healthy and safely contained." Dawson's jaw tightened. "New information suggests the animal is showing signs of inappropriate domestication that would prevent successful reintroduction to the wild." "You mean the news article about him helping our daughter?" Sarah asked. "How is that grounds for emergency removal?" "That's for the department to determine." Dawson took a step forward. "Now, I need to see the animal." "He's with Emily and the dogs in the back pasture," Jack said. "We'll all go together." As they walked toward the pasture gate, Jack quietly activated the recording function on his phone. Something about Dawson's demeanor felt different today, more determined, less concerned with maintaining appearances. They found Emily sitting under the old oak tree, reading aloud from a book while Wilder and the 3 dogs lounged around her in the winter sunshine. The Bobcat, now the size of a large house cat with the distinctive bobbed tail and tufted ears of his species, was grooming himself with typical feline attention to detail. "Emily," Sarah called, keeping her voice casual. "Can you bring Wilder over here? Ranger Dawson needs to check on him." Emily looked up, immediately sensing the tension. She whispered something to Major, who rose and positioned himself between her and the approaching adults. The other dogs flanked the shepherd, with Wilder watching attentively from behind this canine barrier. "That's exactly the problem," Dawson said, pointing. "That's not natural behavior for a wild bobcat. It's acting like those dogs, and they're treating it like one of their pack." "They're protecting him," Jack said, "like they protect Emily." "Which proves my point. That animal is too habituated to ever be released. It's a failed rehabilitation case." Dawson reached for the tranquilizer gun holstered on his belt. "I'm removing it today for assessment at our facility." Sarah stepped forward. "On whose authority? We haven't received any formal notice or court order." "Don't need one for emergency wildlife situations." Dawson raised the tranquilizer gun, sighting down the barrel toward Wilder. "Stand aside." "Lower your weapon," Jack said firmly. "There are children and pets present. This isn't an emergency situation." Dawson kept the gun raised. "That animal is classified as a dangerous predator under Texas law. I'm authorized to use necessary means to secure it." Emily, watching the confrontation unfold, suddenly stood up. "Wilder, come," she called in a clear, confident voice. To everyone's astonishment, the Bobcat immediately responded, trotting to Emily's side and sitting precisely as Major had taught him, alert but calm. "See," Emily said. "He's not dangerous. He's learning." The simplicity of her demonstration momentarily silenced Dawson. The Bobcat, a wild predator by nature, sat obediently beside a child, showing none of the fear or aggression that would be expected. "This doesn't change anything," Dawson finally said, though he lowered the tranquilizer gun slightly. "It just confirms the animal is too domesticated. Or it confirms that we've found a unique approach to wildlife rehabilitation," Sarah countered. "One that might actually work better for orphaned predators than traditional methods." Jack saw an opportunity in Dawson's hesitation. "We've been documenting everything. Ranger, Wilder's development, his interactions with the dogs, his response to training. The university is interested in studying this as a potential model for orphaned predator rehabilitation. That's not how the department does things, Dawson insisted, but doubt had crept into his voice. Maybe it should be, Jack pressed. Instead of rushing to judgment, why not let the experts evaluate what's happening here? Dr. Patterson from Texas A&M is scheduled to visit next week. Wildlife behavior specialists from 3 states have requested access to observe. Emily, still standing with Wilder at her side, added her own perspective. He's learning to be both. Dog lessons now, bobcat lessons later. Her simple summary of their complex situation hung in the air. Even Dawson seemed to recognize the wisdom in her words. His expression conflicted as he looked between the child and the bobcat. "I'll be discussing this with my superiors," he finally said, holstering the tranquilizer gun. "This isn't over, Harrison." After Dawson left, Jack and Sarah held each other tightly, both shaken by the confrontation. He was going to shoot Wilder right in front of Emily. Sarah whispered, "What kind of person does that?" "Someone who's hiding something," Jack replied. "And I think I know what it is." That evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Jack shared his theory with Sarah. The illegal trapping operation wasn't just Miller acting alone, it was a coordinated effort to provide guaranteed trophies for wealthy hunters, with Dawson ensuring no official interference. Wilder's mother had likely been caught to create such an opportunity, and their rescue of the kitten had inadvertently threatened to expose the scheme. If we file complaints about the illegal trap, it would trigger an investigation. Jack explained, "Dawson can't afford that kind of scrutiny. So he's trying to discredit us first," Sarah realized. "Make us look like irresponsible wildlife handlers, so anything we report will be dismissed." "Exactly. And he's using community concern as cover." They worked late into the night, organizing their evidence and preparing for the legal battle that seemed increasingly inevitable. Outside, the 3 German shepherds maintained their vigilant patrol around the house, while inside, Wilder slept curled at the foot of Emily's bed, a wild creature finding its place in a world between 2 worlds, unaware of the storm gathering around him. The court order arrived on a bitterly cold February morning. 2 Texas Parks and Wildlife Department vehicles pulled into the Harrison driveway, followed by Ranger Dawson's familiar truck. Jack met them on the porch, already prepared for this moment. Sarah stood beside him, a folder of documentation clutched in her hands. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrison," the lead officer said, a woman Jack didn't recognize. "I'm Captain Eleanor Reeves from the Austin office. I have an emergency removal order for the bobcat in your possession." She extended an official document bearing a judge's signature. "We'll need to take the animal today for assessment at our rehabilitation facility." Jack accepted the paperwork, scanning it quickly. Everything appeared legally sound. Dawson had finally secured the official backing he'd been threatening for months. "We'd like to review this with our attorney." "The order is effective immediately," Captain Reeves stated firmly. "Where is the animal now?" Sarah stepped forward. "Our daughter is saying goodbye. She deserves that much." Inside Emily's room, a scene was unfolding that would haunt Jack for years to come. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, Wilder before her, the 3 German shepherds forming a protective semicircle around them both. She wasn't crying, she seemed beyond tears, her face set in a composure too profound for a 12-year-old. "Remember everything Major taught you," she was saying to Wilder, who watched her with unblinking golden eyes. "Stay away from people. Hunt at dawn and dusk. Don't chase things that are too big." The bobcat, now nearly full-grown with magnificent tufted ears and powerful shoulders, sat unnaturally still, as if absorbing her every word. In the 6 months since they'd found him orphaned and dying, Wilder had developed into a creature that defied easy classification, neither fully wild nor truly tame, but something uniquely in between. "It's time," Sarah said gently, kneeling beside her daughter. "The officers are waiting." Emily nodded once, then placed her hand on Wilder's head in a gesture somewhere between blessing and farewell. "Be brave," she whispered. The transfer to the transport cage went smoothly until the wildlife officers began to move Wilder toward the door. Major, who had been watching with rigid attention, suddenly planted himself in the doorway, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Duke and Scout flanked him, forming a living barrier. "Call off your dogs, Mr. Harrison," Captain Reeves said, her hand moving toward her tranquilizer gun. "Major, stand down," Jack commanded, though his heart ached at forcing the loyal dog to betray his protective instincts. "Duke, Scout, heel." The shepherds obeyed reluctantly, moving to Jack's side but maintaining a vigilant watch as the officers carried Wilder's cage through the house. As they passed Emily, the bobcat made a sound none of them had heard before, not quite a meow, not quite a growl, but something that carried such evident distress that Emily's composure finally broke. She turned her face into Sarah's shoulder, her body shaking with silent sobs. Outside, Dawson stood by his vehicle with poorly concealed satisfaction. "We'll transport him to our evaluation facility in San Antonio," he informed them. "Initial assessment will take approximately 2 weeks. We have the right to know exactly where he's being taken and to receive regular updates," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "That's spelled out in the Texas Administrative Code regarding seized wildlife." Captain Reeves nodded. "You'll receive written notification of his location and condition reports as required by law." She hesitated, then added more softly, "For what it's worth, I've reviewed your documentation. If half of what you've recorded is accurate, this is certainly an unusual case." "Then why take him now?" Jack demanded. "Why not allow the university research team to complete their evaluation first? Procedure, Mr. Harrison. Wild animals aren't pets, regardless of special circumstances." She handed Sarah a business card. "My direct line. Call for updates anytime." As the convoy of vehicles disappeared down their driveway, Emily stood between her parents, her hand resting on Major's head. The German shepherd whined softly, his eyes fixed on the road where Wilder had vanished. "He's going to try to come home," Emily said with absolute certainty. "He doesn't know he's not supposed to." The aftermath of Wilder's removal revealed the depth of bonds none of them had fully comprehended. Emily, who had made such remarkable progress, retreated into silence. She attended school mechanically, no longer participating in class discussions. At home, she spent hours sitting with the 3 dogs, sometimes whispering to them in words too quiet for her parents to hear. The dogs themselves entered a state of mourning that astonished even Sarah. With her veterinary background, Major refused food for 2 days, an unprecedented behavior for the disciplined shepherd. Duke paced the perimeter fence relentlessly, stopping to stare into the distance at regular intervals. Scout developed a habit of checking Emily's room multiple times daily, as if confirming Wilder's continued absence. "I've never seen anything like it," Sarah told Dr. Wells during the psychologist's visit 1 week after Wilder's removal. "It's as if they've lost a pack member. In their minds, they have," Dr. Wells replied. And Emily's regression suggests she's experiencing a similar grief response. The relationship she formed with Wilder activated social and communication pathways that had previously been underdeveloped. Without that stimulus, she didn't need to complete the thought. They were watching Emily's hard-won progress slip away, powerless to prevent it. The Wildlife Department's updates were frustratingly vague. Wilder was adjusting to the rehabilitation environment. He was displaying typical Bobcat behaviors along with some atypical responses. He was being evaluated for release potential. Nothing in these sterile reports captured the essence of the creature they had known. Jack channeled his frustration into action, compiling their documentation into a formal appeal. Sarah contacted her network of veterinary colleagues, gathering expert statements about interspecies bonding and alternative rehabilitation methodologies. They submitted request after request to visit Wilder, each denied on grounds that it would interfere with the reacclimation process. 2 weeks stretched into 3, then 4. Emily developed insomnia, wandering the house at night. Sarah found her one morning at 3 a.m., sitting on the back porch with Major, both staring into the darkness as if expecting someone to emerge from it. Then, on a rainy afternoon in early March, Captain Reeves called with unexpected news. "We're moving forward with Wilder's release," she informed them. "Our wildlife behaviorists have determined he retains sufficient natural instincts for potential success in the wild." "After only a month?" Sarah questioned. "Traditional rehabilitation for bobcats takes much longer." "This isn't a typical case," Captain Reeves admitted. "Frankly, he's not responding well to our standard protocols. He's refusing most food, displaying stress behaviors, and showing no interest in enrichment activities. The lead biologist feels he might do better in a natural environment where he can fall back on the hunting skills your family reported." What remained unspoken was clear enough: Wilder was failing to thrive in captivity, and they were running out of options. "When will he be released?" Jack asked. "And where?" "Tomorrow morning, Hill Country State Natural Area. It's about 100 miles from your location, sufficient distance to prevent return to human habitation." Jack felt Emily's presence before he saw her, materializing in the doorway as if summoned by the conversation about Wilder. "Can we be there?" he asked, as much for her benefit as from any real hope. "I'm afraid that's not possible," Captain Reeves replied. "Standard protocol requires minimal human presence during releases." After hanging up, Jack knelt before his daughter. "They're releasing Wilder tomorrow. In a beautiful, protected wilderness with plenty of prey and no hunters allowed. He'll have his best chance there." Emily's response was unexpected. "He'll need to cross the river to get home." "Sweetheart, he's not coming home," Sarah said gently. "He's going to live in the wild, like bobcats are supposed to." Emily shook her head with the absolute certainty that sometimes accompanied her most profound insights. "He'll try. The water will be high from the rain. He'll need to find the narrows where we took pictures last summer." Jack and Sarah exchanged concerned glances. Emily's fixation on Wilder's return worried them both, but neither had the heart to challenge her belief. That night, an unusually powerful spring storm system moved through central Texas. Flash flood warnings screamed from their phones as rainfall rates approached 2 inches per hour. Power flickered throughout the night as lightning split the sky in vivid bursts. "I hope they delay the release," Sarah murmured as they lay awake listening to the downpour. "This is terrible weather for a newly released animal." But when morning came with lingering showers and no word of postponement, they assumed the department had proceeded with their plans. Jack checked the Hill Country State Natural Area website, noting with concern that several trails were closed due to flooding. Emily appeared at breakfast dressed for school but carrying her raincoat and boots. "He'll need help crossing the streams," she announced calmly. "They'll be too high." Sarah sighed, her patience wearing thin from stress and lack of sleep. "Emily, please. Wilder is not coming back. He's a wild animal being returned to the wild. We have to accept that." For a moment, the old Emily resurfaced, stubborn, certain, and surprisingly articulate. "Wilder doesn't know he's supposed to be wild. He thinks he's part of our pack." Before either parent could respond, she added, "I need to take food for lunch today." The ordinary request, so incongruous with their extraordinary situation, momentarily disarmed them. Sarah packed a lunch while Jack drove Emily to school, watching her walk into the building with uncharacteristic confidence. The day passed in anxious anticipation of news from the wildlife department. By evening, when no update had arrived, Jack called Captain Reeves directly. "The release went as planned," she informed him. Wilder exhibited typical behavior for a released bobcat, immediate movement away from human presence into cover. "We've fitted him with a tracking collar to monitor his adaptation." "How long will the collar remain active?" Jack asked. "GPS battery should last about 3 months. We're maintaining a geofence alert system. If he approaches developed areas or highways, we'll receive notification." Jack thanked her and hung up, feeling simultaneously relieved that Wilder's release had proceeded without incident and hollow with the finality of it. He found Sarah in their home office, updating Emily's medical records for her upcoming appointment with Dr. Wells. "He's officially wild again," Jack told her, sinking into a chair. "Captain Reeves says the release went smoothly." Sarah nodded, blinking back unexpected tears. "That's good. That's what we wanted all along, right for him to have a normal bobcat life." "Right," Jack agreed, though neither of them sounded convinced. That night, they found Emily in her room, carefully placing food in a plastic container. "What are you doing, honey?" Sarah asked. "He'll be hungry when he gets here," Emily said matter-of-factly. "Major knows, too," as if confirming her statement. The German shepherd sat at attention by her bedroom window, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. Duke and Scout had taken up positions at the back door, their behavior reminiscent of nights when Jack returned late from photography expeditions. "Emily," Jack began gently, "Wilder is 100 miles away in a wilderness preserve. He's not coming here." Emily regarded him with the patient expression of someone explaining a simple concept to someone who repeatedly fails to grasp it. "He doesn't know that's where he's supposed to stay. He only knows where home is." Her certainty was both heartbreaking and unsettling. Jack and Sarah exchanged worried glances, wondering how long this fixation would persist and what further regression might follow when reality finally set in. Outside, the rain continued steadily, punctuated by occasional thunder. None of them could have imagined what was happening 90 miles away, where a confused and determined bobcat was already navigating unfamiliar territory, guided by instincts both natural and learned, moving steadily in a direction that defied all wildlife management expectations. 3 days after Wilder's release, the Harrison household existed in a state of suspended grief. Jack went through the motions of his daily routines, feeding the cattle, maintaining the fences, responding to photography clients, all while carrying a hollowness that surprised him with its depth. He'd known from the beginning that the bobcat was a temporary visitor in their lives, yet somehow Wilder had carved out a permanent place in their family's heart. Sarah threw herself into her veterinary practice with renewed intensity, scheduling extra appointments and volunteering for emergency calls that would normally have gone to her associates. "I need to stay busy," she explained when Jack questioned her sudden workload. "If I slow down, I start thinking about Emily." Their daughter's regression had accelerated. Emily now spoke only when directly questioned, and then with minimal responses. She'd refused to attend school for 2 consecutive days, complaining of stomach pains that Sarah couldn't find any physical cause for. Most concerning, she'd developed a new routine of sitting on the back porch for hours, flanked by the 3 German shepherds, all 4 sets of eyes trained on the distant tree line as if waiting for a visitor they collectively expected. On the morning of the 4th day, Jack received a call from Captain Reeves. "We've lost the signal from Wilder's tracking collar," she informed him without preamble. Jack felt his heart rate quicken. What does that mean? Did the collar fail? Or, most likely scenario is equipment malfunction. She interrupted. The transmitter might have been damaged during the storms. These units are designed to withstand harsh conditions, but nothing's foolproof. Could he have removed it somehow? Jack asked. Extremely unlikely. They're specially designed to prevent self-removal. A more concerning possibility is predation. A larger animal might have damaged the unit during an attack. The thought of Wilder falling prey to a mountain lion or coyote pack sent a chill through Jack. What's his last known position? Captain Reeves hesitated. I shouldn't really share that information. Eleanor, Jack said, switching to her first name intentionally. You know this isn't a typical case. Please. Her sigh carried clearly over the phone. His last ping came from the northwest sector of the preserve, approximately half a mile from the Madrone Trail. That's about 90 miles from your location as the crow flies. She paused. What's concerning is the movement pattern before signal loss. He was traveling in a consistent northeasterly direction, not random exploration we typically see with newly released animals. Northeast, Jack repeated, toward our ranch. I didn't say that, she replied quickly. And even if that were his initial direction, there are countless obstacles between the release site and your property highways, rivers, developed areas. No Bobcat navigates that kind of distance with intentionality. After thanking her for the information, Jack sat at the kitchen table. Mind racing. He pulled up maps on his laptop, tracing potential routes from the state natural area to their property. Captain Reeves was right. The obstacles were formidable. The Guadalupe River, swollen from recent storms, Interstate 10 with its constant traffic, miles of ranches with dogs and hunters. Sarah found him still studying the maps an hour later. Jack, what are you doing? He explained the situation, watching her expression shift from concern to a carefully controlled neutrality he recognized from her most difficult veterinary cases. We can't tell Emily, she said immediately. She's already convinced he's coming back. This would only reinforce her fixation. But what if he is trying to return? Jack pressed. What if Emily's instinct is right? Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Jack, even if, and this is an enormous if, Wilder initially headed in this direction, the chances of a captive-raised bobcat successfully navigating 100 miles of unfamiliar territory are virtually non-existent. Predators, traffic, exhaustion, starvation. Reality doesn't support fairy tale endings here. Emily believes differently. Emily is 12 and autistic, Sarah said more sharply than intended. Her magical thinking about Wilder is a coping mechanism for loss, not a wildlife management strategy. Jack reached for his wife's hand. I know. You're right. But I can't help wondering. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the back door, all three dogs barking with unusual intensity. Not their warning bark for strangers, but something more urgent. Jack found them pawing at the door, whining and circling when he opened it. What's gotten into you three? Major looked directly at Jack, then bounded off the porch toward the north pasture. Duke and Scout followed immediately, moving with purpose rather than the playful energy of a typical excursion. They've never done that before, Sarah said, joining him on the porch. Before Jack could respond, Emily appeared beside them, fully dressed in her rain boots and jacket. Major knows Wilder needs help, she stated with absolute certainty. Jack and Sarah exchanged alarmed glances. Emily, the dogs are just excited about something in the pasture, probably a deer or raccoon, Sarah explained gently. Emily shook her head. Major promised to help Wilder get home. She stepped off the porch, heading in the direction the dogs had taken. Emily, wait, Jack called. But she continued walking with uncharacteristic determination, with no choice but to follow. Jack and Sarah grabbed jackets and hurried after their daughter. The dogs had disappeared over a rise that led toward the seasonal creek marking their property boundary. by the time they caught up to Emily. She was standing at the fence line, the 3 German shepherds milling around her excitedly. "I don't see anything," Sarah said, scanning the wet landscape. Jack was about to suggest they all return to the house when Major suddenly stiffened, ears forward, then vaulted the fence with surprising agility for his age. Duke and Scout immediately followed, all 3 dogs racing toward a ravine that cut through the neighboring property. "Stay here," Jack told Sarah and Emily, climbing the fence. "I'll bring them back." The ravine dropped steeply into a tangle of cedar and oak. Jack could hear the dogs barking below but couldn't see them through the dense vegetation. He picked his way carefully down the slippery slope, calling their names with increasing urgency. The brush thinned at the bottom where a small stream gurgled over limestone. Jack spotted Major first, standing alert beside what appeared to be a fallen tree branch. As he drew closer, he realized the shepherd was guarding something, a still form partially hidden in the shadow of an overhanging rock. Jack's breath caught. Lying on its side, breathing in shallow pants, was a bobcat. Its tawny fur was matted with mud and what looked like blood on one hind leg. Around its neck hung the remains of a tracking collar, the transmitter unit damaged and dangling. "Wilder," Jack whispered incredulously. The bobcat's eyes, those distinctive gold eyes, opened at the sound of his voice. A soft sound somewhere between a mew and a chirp escaped its throat. Major whined, nudging the bobcat gently with his nose. The other 2 dogs stood nearby, alternately watching the ravine entrance and checking on their fallen companion. Jack knelt slowly, hardly believing what he was seeing. The bobcat had traveled nearly 100 miles through completely unfamiliar territory, somehow navigating rivers, highways, and other hazards to arrive less than a quarter mile from their home. It was impossible. It defied every wildlife management principle. Yet here was Wilder. Identification collar still partially attached, having achieved what Captain Reeves had deemed impossible. Moving carefully, Jack shrugged out of his jacket and gently wrapped it around the exhausted bobcat. Wilder offered no resistance, his eyes fixing on Jack's face with what could only be described as recognition. "I've got you," Jack murmured, lifting the surprisingly light bundle. "Let's get you home." As he turned to climb the ravine, he saw Emily standing at the top, Sarah beside her with one hand over her mouth. Major barked once, then began picking his way up the slope ahead of Jack, apparently leading the way. "You found him," Emily said when Jack reached them, her voice filled with a quiet wonder that broke through days of near silence. "Major knew he was coming." Sarah's professional demeanor crumbled as she took in the condition of the bobcat in Jack's arms. "He's dehydrated. Probably hasn't eaten in days, and that leg needs immediate attention." Her hands were already checking Wilder's vital signs, the veterinarian taking precedence over the conflicted parent. "We need to get him inside." The journey back to the house passed in a blur of urgent activity. Sarah cleared her examination table, normally reserved for small livestock emergencies on the ranch. Jack gently laid Wilder down, still wrapped in his jacket. The bobcat's eyes remained open but dull with exhaustion. His breathing labored. "IV fluids first," Sarah muttered, mostly to herself as she gathered supplies. "Then clean that leg wound. Looks like he might have caught it on something fencing maybe, or possibly a predator encounter." Emily stood silently beside the table, one hand resting lightly on Wilder's head. The 3 German shepherds formed a semicircle behind her, all watching intently as Sarah worked. "He came back," Emily said simply. "Just like I told you." Looking at his daughter's face animated again after days of withdrawal and the inexplicable reappearance of an animal that should have been living as a wild predator 90 miles away. Jack felt a sense of witnessing something that defied rational explanation, something that spoke to deeper connections than science could readily catalog. Yes, he agreed softly. He did. In that moment, none of them could have anticipated how Wilder's miraculous return would upend their lives yet again, or the forces already mobilizing to respond to this unprecedented development. The Bobcat's journey home was complete, but the true challenges were only beginning. Sarah worked through the night, her veterinary training focused entirely on stabilizing Wilder's condition. The Bobcat's wounds told a story of an extraordinary journey: lacerations on his paws from rough terrain, a deep gash on his hind leg consistent with barbed wire, and severe dehydration that suggested days without adequate water. Most concerning was his temperature, dangerously low from exposure to the persistent spring rains. "He shouldn't have survived this," Sarah murmured as she administered another round of warmed fluids. "A domestic cat would have died, let alone a captive-raised bobcat with limited survival experience." Jack, who had been maintaining a vigil alongside Emily, studied the GPS collar they'd removed. "The transmitter's damaged, but not from water. Looks like it was crushed against something, maybe when he squeezed through a fence or culvert." Emily hadn't left Wilder's side since they'd brought him home, speaking to him in soft, continuous sentences that seemed to calm the injured bobcat. The German shepherds had established a rotation, with one dog always stationed at the door of the makeshift treatment room while the others patrolled the property with heightened vigilance. By dawn, Wilder's condition had stabilized enough for Sarah to finally rest. "He's not out of danger," she cautioned, "but his vitals are improving. The next 24 hours will be critical." Jack made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, contemplating their precarious situation. Wilder's return forced decisions they weren't prepared to make. The Bobcat was once again in their possession illegally, according to the court order that had mandated his removal. If Dawson discovered Wilder's presence, the consequences could be severe fines, potential criminal charges, even impacts to Sarah's veterinary license. Yet contacting Captain Reeves to report Wilder's location seemed equally impossible. Jack couldn't imagine subjecting the Bobcat to another traumatic relocation after he'd risked everything to return home. And what about Emily? Her immediate revival upon Wilder's return made the thought of separating them again unbearable. While Jack grappled with these dilemmas, another situation was developing that would soon force his hand. 20 miles away, Ranger Thomas Dawson was reviewing an unusual report from a gas station security camera. The grainy nighttime footage showed what appeared to be a bobcat moving with purpose along the road shoulder, heading northeast precisely the direction of the Harrison Ranch. The timestamp indicated this occurred 2 days after Wilder's release, already miles from where he should have remained. Dawson's reaction to this discovery wasn't what one might expect from a wildlife officer. Instead of immediate concern for tracking the animal's movements, he made a phone call to a number not listed in any official directory. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "That bobcat from the Harrison case, it's escaped the release area, heading back toward their property." The voice that responded carried the urbane tones of wealth and entitlement. "I thought you handled this." "Dawson, my clients are arriving next week for their hunt. They've paid premium rates for a guaranteed trophy." "I know, Mr. Whitaker. I'm handling it personally. Just wanted you to be aware of potential complications." "There better not be complications. Not after what I've invested in your career advancement. Find that animal and deal with it, permanently if necessary." The conversation confirmed what Jack had long suspected: Dawson was involved in something far darker than casual corruption. Together with wealthy broker James Whitaker, he had been orchestrating canned hunts for corporate clients, charging exorbitant fees for guaranteed trophies of species that were otherwise protected or difficult to hunt legally. Wilder had unwittingly become a loose thread in their operation, one that Dawson was now determined to eliminate. Later that morning, as Sarah checked Wilder's bandages, the Harrisons' phone rang. Jack answered to find Frank Miller on the line, his voice uncharacteristically urgent. "Harrison, You need to know something. Dawson's been asking around about your bobcat, whether anyone's seen it in the area. He came by my place yesterday. Had some story about the animal being a disease risk if it returned to populated areas. Jack's grip tightened on the phone. Thanks for the heads up. Frank, why are you telling me this? The rancher was quiet for a moment. Been doing some thinking since we last talked. Those hunting parties Dawson brings through my land. Started noticing things don't add up. Game appearing where it shouldn't be. Convenient timing. Trophy-sized predators showing up right when his clients arrive. Another pause. Doesn't sit right with me anymore. That's not hunting, it's execution for entertainment. After thanking Miller, Jack shared the warning with Sarah. Dawson suspects Wilder is back. He'll be watching us closely. Then we need to move him, Sarah said immediately. A friend has a veterinary facility in Austin with private recovery kennels. If we can get Wilder there until he's healed. She was interrupted by Emily's appearance in the doorway, her face set with unusual determination. Wilder stays here, she stated firmly. He came home. The clarity of her opposition startled them both. Emily rarely expressed such direct challenges to her parents' decisions. Sweetheart, Sarah began gently, it's not safe for Wilder here right now. Ranger Dawson is a bad man, Emily finished. He hurts animals for money. I heard you and Dad talking. Jack knelt to her level. That's why we need to protect Wilder. And sometimes protecting someone means helping them stay hidden until it's safe. Emily considered this, her thought process visible in the slight furrow of her brow. Like Anne Frank, she said finally, referencing a book they'd read together. Hidden but still home. Something like that, Jack agreed, relieved at her understanding. Their plans to move Wilder were interrupted that afternoon by an unexpected visit. Dr. Patricia Wells arrived for her scheduled session with Emily, unaware of the dramatic developments of the past 24 hours. Jack met her in the driveway, unsure how much to reveal. The psychologist sensed his hesitation immediately. What's happened? Jack, you look like you haven't slept. He made a split-second decision to trust her. Wilder's back. Dr. Wells blinked in surprise. The bobcat. But I thought he was released in a wildlife preserve miles from here. He was. He found his way back injured but alive. We're treating him now. But it's complicated. The wildlife department doesn't know he's here. And we have reason to believe there might be illegal activity involving one of their officers. Rather than expressing alarm or disapproval, Dr. Wells simply nodded. I'd like to see him, and Emily's interaction with him. This could be significant for her case study. Inside, they found Emily reading aloud to Wilder, who lay on a blanket in the carefully secured room. The bobcat's eyes were alert now, following Emily's movements with evident recognition. Most striking was Emily herself, animated, expressive, using complex sentences and even different voices for characters in the book. Dr. Wells observed silently for several minutes before speaking. I've been in practice for 30 years, she said quietly. I've never seen a connection like this. It's extraordinary. As they watched, Wilder struggled to his feet despite his injuries and limped to Emily's side, pressing against her in a gesture reminiscent of the German shepherd's affectionate behavior. Emily responded by gently stroking his head, continuing her story without interruption. This isn't just an animal providing comfort, Dr. Wells observed. This is communication, a genuine reciprocal relationship. In all my years working with children on the spectrum, I've never documented anything quite like it. That evening, as Jack secured the property for the night, he noticed unusual vehicle activity on the county road bordering their land. The same dark SUV had passed 3 times in the past hour, slowing near their gate each time. His suspicions aroused. Jack positioned trail cameras at strategic points around the property. His precautions proved warranted. Just after midnight, the security system alerted him to movement near the south fence line. The night vision footage showed a figure carrying what appeared to be a rifle, moving stealthily toward the house. Jack woke Sarah immediately. "Someone's on the property, armed." As they debated calling the sheriff, another alert triggered, this time showing the unmistakable outline of Ranger Dawson approaching their barn, rifle in hand, clearly searching for something. Or someone. "He's looking for Wilder," Jack realized. "Not executing illegal search hunting." The revelation crystallized everything Jack had suspected about Dawson's corruption. This wasn't law enforcement, it was elimination of evidence. A bobcat that had traveled 100 miles to return home could expose uncomfortable questions about the ethics of their wildlife management practices, questions that might lead to discoveries about Dawson's illegal hunting operation. When the alarm on the back door triggered, Jack had no choice. He placed a call not to the local sheriff, whom he suspected might be aligned with Dawson, but directly to Captain Reeves in Austin. "Someone's breaking into our home," he told her urgently. "Armed. I have video evidence that it's Ranger Dawson." Her response was immediate. "Secure your family. I'm dispatching state troopers and coming myself. Don't confront him. Jack?" As they waited in the darkened house, Emily curled protectively beside Wilder, the 3 German shepherds on high alert at strategic positions. Jack finally understood the full implications of what they'd stumbled into. Wilder wasn't just a bobcat who thought he was a dog, he was living proof of corruption in the very system designed to protect wildlife. A witness whose very existence threatened those who exploited Texas's natural resources for profit. When headlights finally illuminated their driveway 40 minutes later, none of them could have predicted how the night would end, or the startling revelations that would follow. The State Wildlife Commission hearing room buzzed with unusual energy for a Wednesday morning, typically reserved for discussions of hunting seasons and conservation budgets. Today, the wood-paneled chamber accommodated an overflow crowd of journalists, wildlife experts, local residents, and curious onlookers. At the center of it all sat the Harrison family, Jack, Sarah, and Emily with their attorney, a distinguished environmental lawyer who had taken their case pro bono after the story broke in regional news. 6 weeks had passed since the night Thomas Dawson had been arrested on the Harrison property. The investigation that followed revealed a corruption scheme more extensive than even Jack had suspected. Financial records showed Dawson had received over $200,000 in consulting fees from Whitaker Trophy Experiences, a company that guaranteed successful hunts to wealthy clients at $25,000 per expedition. Further investigation revealed that many of the wild trophies had been captured elsewhere and strategically released in hunting zones, including several female bobcats from the same region where Wilder's mother had been killed. The scandal had prompted this unprecedented hearing to determine not only Wilder's fate, but potentially to establish new protocols for wildlife rehabilitation and management across the state. The 7 commissioners, appointed by the governor to oversee Texas wildlife resources, listened intently as expert witnesses presented testimony. Dr. Elaine Cavazos from Texas A&M's Veterinary School presented her findings first. "In my 30 years of wildlife behavioral research, I've never documented a case like Wilder's," she explained, gesturing to video footage showing the bobcat's interactions with the German shepherds. "What we're witnessing is not mere imprinting or domestication, but something more profound: the adoption of complex social behaviors across species lines, while maintaining core instinctual capabilities." The video showed Wilder participating in the dog's patrol routines, responding to verbal commands, yet still demonstrating natural bobcat behaviors like climbing, stalking, and pouncing. "He exists in a unique behavioral space," Dr. Cavazos concluded, "neither fully wild nor domestic, but carrying elements of both worlds." Dr. Patricia Wells followed with her assessment of Emily's relationship with Wilder. The therapeutic benefits have been remarkable and measurable, she testified, displaying charts showing Emily's communication development. Emily's verbal expression increased by over 300% during her time with Wilder. Her ability to engage socially, maintain eye contact, and express emotional understanding all showed unprecedented improvement. When asked about the potential trauma of separating them again, Dr. Wells was unequivocal. Based on Emily's regression during Wilder's absence and her immediate recovery upon his return, I believe permanent separation would cause significant psychological harm. Captain Eleanor Reeves provided the wildlife management perspective. Wilder's journey back to the Harrison Ranch defies conventional understanding, she admitted. The GPS data we recovered shows he traveled nearly 100 miles in adverse conditions, navigating obstacles that should have been insurmountable for a captive-raised predator. He crossed 2 major highways, a river swollen with floodwater, and multiple territories of established predators. She displayed a map tracking his remarkable journey. Most telling is the directness of his route. This wasn't random wandering, he was navigating with clear intent toward a specific destination. Frank Miller's testimony surprised many in the audience. The weathered rancher, uncomfortable in his Sunday suit, spoke plainly about his evolution from predator hunter to reluctant conservationist. "I've killed bobcats my whole life, thought it was necessary," he admitted. But watching what that animal went through to get home, that's not something you see from a mindless predator. That creature knew where he belonged, and nothing was going to stop him. He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Made me reconsider some things." Throughout the proceedings, Wilder remained at a rehabilitation facility, his fate hanging in the balance. Emily, who had been prepared extensively by Dr. Wells, sat attentively beside her parents, occasionally whispering questions to Sarah. When all expert testimony concluded, the commission chair turned to Emily. "We've heard from many experts today, but I understand you would like to speak as well. Young lady." Emily stood, clutching a single sheet of paper. Jack and Sarah exchanged worried glances. They'd practiced this moment extensively. But Emily's anxiety in public settings remained unpredictable. "My name is Emily Harrison. I am 12 years old, and I have autism," she began, her voice initially soft but growing steadier. "Before Wilder came, words stayed inside my head. I could see and understand things, but explaining them was like trying to catch smoke." She looked up from her paper, making rare direct eye contact with the commissioners. "Wilder doesn't know he's supposed to be wild. He knows he's supposed to be with us, with Major and Duke and Scout, with me. He learned to be part of our family, and we learned from him too." Emily set her prepared remarks aside, continuing spontaneously. "When you took him away, he traveled 100 miles to come home. If you take him away again, he'll just try to come back. Or maybe he'll give up and die." Is that what wildlife management means? Making animals suffer until they give up? A hush fell over the hearing room at the directness of her question. Even the commissioners seemed taken aback by the clear logic from the formerly nonverbal child. "Wilder belongs with us," Emily concluded simply. "He decided that himself." After Emily's testimony, the commissioners recessed for deliberation. Jack, Sarah, and Emily waited in a small conference room, joined by Dr. Wells and their attorney. "You did beautifully." Sarah said, hugging her daughter. "Do you think they'll let Wilder come home?" Emily asked, the worry evident in her voice. "I don't know," Jack answered honestly. "But whatever happens, we'll face it together." When the hearing reconvened 2 hours later, the commission chair addressed the packed room with unusual solemnity. "In the 30 years I've served on this commission, we've never encountered a case quite like this one," he began. Our mandate is to protect Texas wildlife according to best scientific practices and established regulations. However, occasionally situations arise that challenge our frameworks and require innovative thinking. He summarized the unique aspects of Wilder's case: the extraordinary journey home, the documented therapeutic relationship with Emily, the unusual behavioral adaptation that maintained wild instincts alongside learned social behaviors. After careful consideration, this commission has determined that Wilder represents a unique case requiring a unique solution. He paused, the room absolutely silent. We are establishing a new classification for this situation, Wildlife Ambassador, with specific permit requirements and oversight protocols. The terms of this unprecedented decision unfolded. Wilder would be allowed to remain with the Harrison family under strict conditions. Their ranch would be designated as an educational facility where supervised visits could demonstrate responsible wildlife management and interspecies relationships. Jack and Sarah would receive specialized training. Regular inspections would ensure Wilder's welfare, and Emily would continue working with Dr. Wells to document the therapeutic benefits of their relationship. This decision is not made lightly, nor does it establish a precedent for private ownership of native wildlife, the chairman emphasized. Rather, it recognizes that in this extraordinary case, the best outcome for both the animal and the humans involved is a supervised continuation of their existing relationship. As the formal proceedings concluded, Emily turned to her parents with a smile that illuminated her entire face. "Wilder's coming home," she said simply, "for good." Outside the hearing room, Captain Reeves approached the family. "Congratulations," she said. "I'll be your primary liaison for the ambassador program. There's plenty of paperwork ahead, but," she smiled at Emily, "I think we made the right decision." "What about Dawson?" Jack asked quietly. Facing multiple felony charges: wildlife trafficking, corruption, breaking and entering, illegal hunting. His trial starts next month. She shook her head. "The investigation has uncovered similar operations in 3 other states. Your Bobcat helped expose something much bigger than we imagined." As they drove home that afternoon, Emily fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the emotional day. Sarah reached for Jack's hand across the console. "So we're running an educational wildlife facility now?" she asked, a mix of wonder and trepidation in her voice. Jack squeezed her hand. "Apparently so. Not exactly how I plan to spend my 40s. "Do you think it will work, this ambassador concept?" Jack considered the question as the familiar hill country landscape rolled past. "I don't know, but Wilder crossed 100 miles to come home. After that, making this work seems like the easy part." Folks, the story of Wilder and Emily reminds us of what we've always known in our hearts, but sometimes forget in this fast-paced world, that the connections between living creatures transcend our neat categories and scientific explanations. Remember when neighbors looked out for each other, when your word meant something, when standing up for what's right wasn't political, but simply American. This family faced a system that had forgotten how to see the extraordinary in favor of rigid rules. Their struggle echoes our own experiences fighting bureaucracy, standing up to corruption, protecting those we love against all odds. But more than that, it speaks to our deepest longing for home, like Wilder crossing 100 miles to return where he belonged. We all seek that place where we're truly known and loved. In our children's and grandchildren's generations, where connection often happens through screens instead of souls, this story reminds us of what really matters: the courage to follow your heart home, the family that stands together against all odds, and the healing power of unconditional love. Some bonds can't be explained by science, they can only be understood by the heart. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.